The smartest guys around are about to break it down like they've won the game a million times.
Wow.
Yeah, we haven't won the game. Both of us. I haven't even played. I'm sorry.
At all?
Survivor Know-It-Alls. Survivor Know-It-Alls.
Shannon and Christian.
Got the game all figured out. They know it all.
Yes, that's right. Survivor Know-It-Alls are back, and I am just elated for so many reasons. Sometimes you just pinch yourself at getting to do this as a job, and I am, because so many things. Survivor is an amazing show. It's been 23 years. It is no right for it to be so good. I am so hyped up on the incredibleness of that episode. The first effective shot in the dark play that negated some votes. 11 votes, the most votes, I think, ever globally. I off the top of my head, ever negated by a trinket in global Survivor history. It's historic. And I get to talk about it with someone that I idolize. What a world. I have the incredible Dr. Christian Hubicki with me. Christian!
It's great to be with you, Shannon. Thanks for having me on. And I tell you, what a climactic finish we got to have for an episode. And I'm glad to be talking about it, especially with someone with such a global perspective on Survivor. Perhaps, I would assume the global expert on Survivor season. So
No.
I'm very excited as well.
Look, I become the global expert because something like that happens and I panic and I'm like, have we ever negated 11 votes? I mean, again, not that I can think of. Christian.
Oh, definitely not
5
U.S.
seasons.
Survivor. This is. It effectively acts like an idol play, and we all know the Kelly Wentworth, how incredible that was at the time. So it's got to be the record. But yeah, we have so much to dig into. So I'll follow your lead. I'm sure. I hear you have approximately 20,000 words of notes. So we got to get cracking.
No, 2,500. Not.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
20,000 would be crazy. I don't even think at my most I could get close. But okay, so let's talk about it. 5 seasons of Shot in the Dark. It's never. I mean, it's hit, but it's never hit. But like, this is worth it. It's like for this moment of Caleb being safe, and like you got to feel for Jeremiah. We'll talk about her journey through all of this. But like for the protagonist with Emily to be saved, Caleb, who's so likable, a lot of people are rooting for Caleb, for it to hit in that fashion. Like, just give me before we talk through the strategy, just like give me the gut feeling right now.
Well, I mean, it's such an incredible payoff to a twist that's been enacted. This is the 5th season, and we haven't seen it pay off. I mean, when I talked about the Shot in the Dark in previous seasons, it's kind of been with the tone of, are they going to ditch the Shot in the Dark? I'm not a results-oriented person. I understand there's randomness is clumpy. Sometimes you have lots of dry spells on anything. But we've had, this was the 10th time the Shot in the Dark has been played. It's to my knowledge. I think we did some quick research before the podcast. And this is the first time it has prevented anyone from going home. In fact, it's only the 2nd time that someone's actually pulled out the little safe card, period. It happened back in 44, but it wasn't effective. So to have it come out, and everyone had voted for Caleb. So that was what made it exciting. And you got to see for the first time every vote negated, actually, unless it happened in Cambodia, but we'll get back to that in a second. But that's my high level impression is it went from a twist from being, okay, what is this really adding to the show? There is some minor benefit to being that it's not going anywhere, at least for a while, because it gave Survivor this moment. Survivor is the one who should be buying a lotto ticket, not Caleb, because they've had a number of twists hit in interesting ways this season.
Yeah, the meta of the Shot in the Dark is fascinating to me because you're right. We now have it forever. I hope it was worth it for all of you, for anyone who kind of feels it's a little played out, which I honestly had been around just like the thinking about throwing votes and stuff. I thought it was getting, I feel the whole vote economy is a little finicky for me, a little played out. But for a moment like this, I mean, from your season, when the nullifier hit like it did, they were like, yes, we are buying stocks in the nullifier, no matter how specific that situation was. And for something like this, which again, I think is very rare, they'll be coming back to it. I also wonder how the meta will change around the players who are like kind of scared of shot in the dark, but like it's never negated any votes. And now I feel like for some reason, like the paranoia of shot in the dark might be elevated even more so. So big night for shot in the dark, the biggest night we've had for the shot in the dark. And it was just an incredible episode. I thought, you know, the 90 minutes of something like Murgatory to get all those individual perspectives. Something that I've loved about this season is that it does not feel just like shoehorned in or just delivered to me by production. Even though this was a production mechanism of the shot in the dark saving Caleb, it was the connection he's made with Emily and then the connection she's made to get to that point, to give him that information, to throw everything at the wall and then play it. There is so much meaning in everything that's happening. And as hard as it might be to understand, then meaning in the fact that J. Maya is going to go home. So some pure, great individual strategy. Sorry, not great strategy. We'll talk it through. I disagree with pretty much everything everyone did in this episode.
We'll get to that.
We'll get to it. But it's about the nuance and the dynamics of the strategy is just, I love Survivor, Kristen. I love it so much.
It's a great night to be a Survivor fan tonight when you have a big payoff like that, a big surprise. And it felt like it was a long time in the works. I feel like the show has, ever since the new era, as Jeff calls it, when they added a lot of twists, they've been feeling around for the next big thing. And I think I think a lot of us have seen what they're trying to go for, but for various reasons, it hasn't always paid off in some big explosive moment, which is, I think, that a feeling that I feel that they've been chasing since the days of Micronesia, when they. But that's when hidden immunity idols were flying, and they were flying around and then negating all kinds of votes, blindside after blindside. I think that I maintain that that's the genesis of what they realized that Survivor could become, is this series of explosive moments. And they've been chasing that high ever since. And then at times getting wonderful seasons in the process. And I think that this has been the payoff for a couple of the things involved. They've been trying to play with what you call the vote economy for a bit, and like, you know, trading your vote for some kind of advantage. And for most of the time on these seasons, we're like, it often doesn't make a difference. You know, it's sort of a thing that happens, like, oh, I'll trade in my vote, but very rarely does it make a decisive difference in the vote. We got that in episode 3, how that played out. That again, why they what a high for the season. And here you got the shot in the dark paying off. Even though, strategically speaking, what we saw wasn't too much different than if he had pulled out a hidden immunity idol. That was a surprise, right? And J. Maya went home. Now, the way it played out on screen was much more exciting, because then you got the surprise, because even Caleb doesn't know he was staying.
Yeah, that was epic.
I also wonder how smart I think your point is about the meta, before I go way off on that tangent, that the players are responding to what they've seen most recently on the show, and when they are going out and playing. And you can go through the time, and this happens, I think, when you talk to basically anyone on the show these days, that people were responding on season 37 that I was on to season 35 stuff, because that was the last thing we really saw. And so everyone's worrying about Ben bombs and idol runs and things like that, and people respond accordingly. Interestingly enough, I think that this is going to make people more want to blindside people, which I didn't think was possible. I think there's almost a lapse in judgment that this wasn't a blindside. Well, it's more Emily.
Yeah, let's discuss that.
But yeah, I think it will make people more paranoid of a shot in the dark, because they saw what happened in this vote. And it's so memorable. It's going to stick in the minds of people who are going to be out there on Survivor 47.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much here. No votes thrown, no blindside, because Emily has to be informed. And that comes down to where we're at with the decisions being made. There were, again, a lot of decisions that I disagree with. And I think because it is this big Murgatory communal vote, we have to, and it was unanimous, we have to just, for me, break it down by former OG tribes and see where their plans were and the intricacies of those into how we get to this point. And I would love to start with Reba, because Reba just want to blindside J. Maya. And we can talk that through about even though it doesn't go that way, there's so much want to get rid of J. Maya. And so for Reba, I'd love to talk through 3 kind of decision-making possibilities. Obviously, J. Maya, something they're obsessed with. Then Caleb, which is what they go with. And then for me, what I'd love to start with, and why I think I disagree so badly with both Bellow and Reba in this episode, is that they were so congenial. And maybe I'm being so antisocial in my podcasting lately. I'm like Drew style binary, go to war. In saying that, Reba, go to war. If you can keep it cohesive, and J Maya, we can talk about it, has been so loyal. They will go into 12 with 6 and Emily. They will have a plurality and probably a majority. And I think they're cohesive enough. They're pushing it. But I think they could be cohesive enough to keep someone like Sifu, who's like, oh my God, our guys are back. To keep J Maya, who was actively protected D in the vote against Sifu, to try and keep that for a couple of votes, to really just like dominate and have a majority. Like, does no one want to win a war these days? So for me, the first plan I'd love to get to, which was unsaid from what we saw before we even get to a Caleb J Maya debate, is why, and I'd love your take, why not a Bellow? Why not Kelly, who also took away Austin's sandwich, and more importantly, I would think, I'm hoping that's a bit, but more importantly, can progress his amulet and weaken a legitimate other side for a war we keep hearing about. Reba, from my perspective, win the war tonight.
Yeah, and for my, I have 2 points I want to get to. First, very quickly, when I get to come on the podcast, I feel lucky not only because I get to be here, but I also get to bring in all the quietly done research by Emily, who did a sandwich count tonight. So that she kept a running tally of the number of sandwich mentions from Austin. Apparently, you got 8 sandwich mentions, which is a lot for any one episode. Sandwiches one time. I mentioned sandwich one time, and I'm still hearing about it to this day. But 8 times, he's going to be stuck with that for eternity.
No, well, it's amazing. It's like my favorite storyline in a good long while. Again, I hope it's a bit, and he's not really motivated by the revenge for the sandwich.
Me too.
But the fact that his entire arc to this point is like a Ross Geller style, like, my sandwich, is genuinely incredible television to me. So I'm grateful for the content we're getting on that.
This is and when it comes to your broader question about why not go to war, I am kind of refreshed by that, because I feel like that has been the narrative for so many seasons. In fact, I was thinking about how have these mergatory votes, by the way, we got to come up with a different name for mergatory. The show has to come up with a different name for mergatory.
Murgatory with a hard G.
Hard G?
I always go with the hard G.
What I think one of the biggest issues I have with this format is they just don't have a name for it. They got to come up like, is it a gathering of the tribes before a merging of the tribes? Something like the gathering. They need some in-universe name for it. I don't know what it is, but Jeff can't call it mergatory. He actually came pretty close by calling it limbo, tonight. And so they need a name for it. It was a good vote, and I went and looked at the previous votes. Every single one of these non-merges, the biggest tribe has lost a member. Every single one of them. Wow. And sometimes that is, I think, causal. That's the little tribes being scared of the big tribe, and they band together to knock them down a peg, which is how the 3-tribe format, frankly, works well. Is it prevents the I think the ground state of things, which is one big tribe picking off the smaller tribes, or at least it mitigates that. On occasion, and that's how but it would have been a little different tonight. They were actually looking to pick off Caleb, if not for a serendipitous lottery ticket that he had played and won. So I'm a little refreshed that it's not the case that they're talking that way. But that said, we'd heard them talk. We'd heard Drew talking about this a lot. I want to say back last episode with the Brando vote, there was Brando had pitched some kind of nerd alliance, and Drew was like, none of that, which was a shocking moment at the time. Just like, oh, someone said no to an alliance on Survivor. That's pretty uncommon. But to me, there was some broader thinking about the tribe dynamics, which is what you would expect. What can you attribute that to? It's difficult to say, but this time we had an actual swap. We had an actual swap of the tribes where there was at least some intermixing, even at least among some of the tribes, even though the mixing wasn't really there wasn't a lot of mixing going on because of the way that the tribe swap worked out. But I think that the little bit of mixing that we got maybe had people thinking in different ways. Another factor is why was it there's such a focus on J Maya, and I think that's your next point. I think that it came, that like I get the sense that Dee and Julie really wanted to do something, and they hadn't gone to tribal yet. I mean, like you could tell they were itching to go to tribal and blindside J Maya, and I feel that there were like I remember my first tribal council. I was getting ready to go. In my head, I had concocted like a 4-phase plan that would have taken the vote in a completely different direction. And I'm glad that I didn't have a chance to implement it, because the way simpler plan Elizabeth came up with was way better, right? But I can feel that itch to do a thing, and I'm glad I kind of got to get it out of my system. I had a vote that worked and was actually pretty straightforward. But if you're like just antsy, you're in this game that you're supposed to make quote unquote big moves. And I think that they were like, this is a thing that they can do. And and I think that there was this snowballing around her. I guess maybe I'm going into J Maya at this point. And I think that's why it happened, and why, more to your point, why we didn't turn it into just a tribe war.
Okay, I love your devil's advocacy, and now I'm going to undercut why all of those things were wrong. Firstly, big move, sacrificing poor sweet J Maya is nothing compared to winning the war against Bellow. Now that's a move, like for Reba, like that's the big thing. So I don't like their obsession with J Maya, something we'll talk about. Then from a Murgatory perspective, you're right. So what we get from these like half immune votes, and we've seen it in international as well, is the fear of the vulnerable. So that's a big thing in terms of these, as you say, from the larger tribes, or at least an equal tribe, someone going first, is that firstly, maybe the other people in that tribe have more to and are willing to sacrifice as a gesture of goodwill and out of fear. At least it's not me. For Reba, who are that tribe in this situation, I strongly feel that they should not have had to have that happen, because firstly, only Dee of their core alliance was vulnerable and she seemed okay. And they also have so much power to make this happen. So the other part of that, in terms of letting another member go in these 3 tribe formats as well, is that it lessens the threat level of the big tribe. And we do hear Emily say, counter to what I thought last week, is that a reason to go with Reba is they're fractured, hilariously, compared to Bellow. There's room to move. Austin is pushing that with Emily. So they would think, let's sacrifice that. We lower our threat level. And I definitely see parts of that. But I think for Reba, when you're so close to having the actual numbers, I would rather just put my foot on the pedal rather than giving them a sacrifice to lessen that threat level. Like J Maya even says it. She's like, they should be scared of us. We're threatening. It's threatening for a reason, because it's big, because it's powerful, and you have that, and you've given that away. So I think that they just had an opportunity here to take a shot that they didn't want to take. There is so much discussion around being congenial. I'm like, let's stop being friendly. Let's slit some throats. So much conversation around then Bellow will be okay with it. Dee speaks about not burning bridges. Austin's like, oh, this is something we can get all the tribes on board with. Even like J Maya and Jay could discuss, we'll do a Lulu. Like, where can we kind of, give to get, and where can we be congenial? I say no. I say Reba, win the war. Go to 12 with a majority or plurality, keep it together, and then eat your own. Like, that it's wrong when you go to Bellow with the J Maya vote and they're all thrilled, as much as it doesn't play out, but they're thrilled that you're doing the dirty work for them, because you have place here where Kelly and Jake should be more scared than you, where you have protection within Murgatory with the immune people, that they were pretty well protected and they had so much power. Like, for me, they should not have been squeezed out in the fear that like Taku weren't in having to sacrifice a Lydia, that Danny and Deshawn weren't having to sacrifice a Sydney, out of the fear that it will just fall back on them. They had enough space and scope here, I think, to really take a real hit, to make a real hit on someone like a Kelly. And I know it's fan fiction because it was never discussed. It was so congenial, but I just simply don't agree. That's what they did with it. Even pre-challenge, they're throwing J Maya as well. So it's not even just like the fear of, maybe that's the fear of Murgatory without knowing how the numbers shake out. But I thought it was the wrong instinct, and I thought it was premature even then.
Well, and I don't disagree with you, to be clear. I think that my experience from watching the show, having experienced it, like everything you say, I can't really argue with, because especially once you would take, like, if you can believe that the Reba folk, from their perspective, let's say they think they can stick together somehow, that they can paper over the differences. There's not a blood feud between Sifu and J Maya, for instance, right? Let's assume that didn't happen, and you can paper them together. You get rid of one of the Bellows. You then now have you now have your 6 against a 4 and a 2.
Yeah.
And if you posture as tighter, then you can control the game at least for a little bit. Sure. I think that what I'm looking at is like what causes people to make a decision that is counterintuitive. Let's say that oh, let's get rid of a J Maya. Why do we want to get rid of J Maya so much? And when it comes to maneuvering within the game, figuring out what these little things are that motivate people to vote a certain way, I mean, often that's the thing you need to find. And I love how you pointed out how Bellow was so happy to hear that J Maya was a target. And he even came down to this really great and interesting moment between Jake and D, where D was talking to Jake. It's like, oh, who should vote out? And Jake, I think correctly, does not want to throw out a name. When you throw out a name, you got to be able to back it up. And he's just hungry for any name. And D is hungry to throw out a name. She's so ready to throw out a J Maya, which she in that situation, J Maya holds a lot of the power. So not J Maya, but D holds a lot of the power in that situation because she has more numbers.
Yeah.
And you see that in kind of two different ways this episode. I mean, we'll talk more about these other characters, but there is the Caleb and Bruce tiff, right? You've got where it's similar that where Bruce has far more numbers than Caleb. Caleb is on the bottom; he's scrounging around, and Bruce gives him a dressing down for doing that. And that's the power of being in the majority. You can go up to the minority and basically demand what you want. And a lot, whether it's information, it's fealty, it's all kinds of stuff. And the person in the minority goes, oh yeah, absolutely. It's
Yeah.
and I think that people on Reba were very willing and kind of stunningly willing to go down in the numbers. And I wonder why. I'm guessing, one guess is that they really wanted the game to start. They want to make a move to get their feet wet in this game. But there's also, but also even the seeming willingness to get rid of J Maya particularly always confused me a bit. I feel like I'm missing something there because my introduction to J Maya is like, yeah, she seems smart. She figured out that cool letter puzzle. I wanted to give her so much credit for figuring out that was a puzzle on the tribe flag, that little thing. That was great. And it makes me wonder, is there other things we're not seeing about the J Maya relationship that explain what's happening beyond what we saw? Maybe that needs 120 minutes. I don't know.
Well, for J Maya, we can talk about it. I feel gaslit on J Maya. I feel like I have to go back and be like, is she going to turn on them? Why are they so sure of that? And then I'm like, no, it's unfortunate we have to do this for the exit interviews. I'm used to podcasting after I can listen to exit interviews. But I feel certain J Maya was loyal to the cause. And why do I think that? She told us in confessional, not that they can see that, but also she put her money where her mouth was. She has protected Dee's vote against Sifu this entire time. She has given her soul to Reba. So when Julie says she'll cut me the second she can, it's like she actually could have already. And you can say she's too separate from Sifu to use that, but she has done so much for you. Like she has absolutely in action, even before really being able to vote in a real vote, like where Sean sent himself home. But she has actually in action been able to prove loyalty, which it should be rare at this phase for them. So I think their read on J Maya is just simply wrong. And whether it's a social thing, whether it's big movitis, as you said, I think misplaced big movitis, that's its own thing, but I think it's absolutely the wrong instinct. Then you ask, well, why would they do something like this? Like, why would they pile on? And I think, as wrong as I think it is, I will give a couple of reasons, but they're reasons I disagree with, but here they are. Firstly, is it the unknowingness of the game? We see there's going to be the split tribal next week. Is it, I don't want to make enemies, and then in next week, am I split into a tribe where them are the majority? I would disagree with that, as I bring up the point in saying, if you're congenial with everyone, you're actually good with no one. There's wars coming anyway. Those numbers, if they can capitalize next week, will probably get you. You're better to further your numbers in the better hope of the odds that the split serves you and you accrue numbers rather than sacrificing one of your own. If anything, I actually think that's more of a reason to keep a number. Secondly, and I think this is huge, I think this is a massive reason Austin and Drew do this. They're sacrificing a vote for an idol. And if you're doing something like going for Bellow, is it a 7-6? Is it at best with Caleb an 8-5 that you can't trust? You're definitely not hiding it in this big mass vote. You're maybe having to not even sacrifice your vote. If this was all done to get the idol, I just simply disagree. Like, I think that if you can get Kelly out and OJ Maya has no agency, you're pretty close to the amulet anyway. Like, if you have to vote, you have to vote. Or if your lost vote has to be known and there's confusion, I would personally choose that. But I think that those are two big reasons. And I agree with you in looking at like the D and Jake conversation, the leverage was swapped. Reba were giving up their leverage. Like, you have the numbers, you have the power, and their power group is more okay in terms of who's immune and who's vulnerable. It's just D. Jake and Kelly should have been scrambling, and yet Jake was cagey again, like he was with Caleb, and the leverage was swapped because I feel like Reba gave up so much of their power with this just wrong instinct for me.
Well, and I'm trying to like hypothesize what drove that decision. And I'm trying to look at one thing I'm looking at is the timeline of when Caleb seemingly redirects the Reba vote toward Caleb. And it was I believe it was Bruce approaching Caleb about how Bruce approaching Drew about about not liking Caleb. And I think that something goes off in Drew's head and sees an opportunity there. And I wonder if it is in part to get some buy-in from Reba to make sure, and this could be what you're talking about, to get more of a vote margin. And there could be a couple of threes, or maybe he just wants to just have that cushion. He doesn't want there to be some kind of nonsense going on, whether it is to get that vote. But yeah, I think that as we're led to believe from the show, that's the light bulb that goes off with Drew.
Yeah.
That there's willingness. We can all get together on this vote to prevent a war, and which though would be at odds. Maybe it's not what he's thinking, because it's kind of at odds with what he was saying. He's talking about going to war.
Yeah,
that he's ready for that war. But I think that maybe he saw an opportunity for what he considered to be friendly fire, and went for that. That's possible what he was thinking.
No.
And I'm thrilled to talk about all the gamesmanship going on. One thing I want to point out is that I think a lot of these players are actually very good communicators and to confessional. And that's one thing I've actually enjoyed a lot about this season. I'll use Drew as an example. I'll use another also. I think Drew is actually a very good confessionalist, not only in explaining what's happening, but also delivering it in a way that's kind of memorable. Like when he's talking about extending votes extending idle powers via giving up votes. He does this little, he says, we can extend it to this length, whoop, extend it to this length, whoop. And that makes it a memorable sequence. It's actually a good teaching technique to use that onomatopoeia to have it stick in the audience's mind what's happening, whether it's your classroom or it's your audience. So he's good at that. And even when people are explaining little things that happen around camp, I'll point out one thing I actually liked of Dee a couple episodes ago, where she's describing catching Drew in the act of looking for an idol and saying, it's like I caught my boyfriend cheating on me. And she said it in a way that makes me feel like this has happened.
Yeah, she said on Twitter that it kind of actually had. So that's a good thing. Yeah.
Exactly. So it gives you not only a sense of what's happening on the show, but a little bit about what she is in her normal life. And it's all communicated via that analogy. So the players are good at communicating. So, and I think that's been helpful in these 90-minute episodes. I think there's just some question mark for me still as to why it was J Maya. And hopefully tomorrow we get some answers to that.
Sometimes people just make crazy decisions. Like, I think that's the J Maya thing, because their read on her is just simply wrong. Like, if he comes out in the exit interviews and is like, I was going to burn them all, I'd be shocked. I really, truly don't think that was the vibe. She kept telling us. She proved it so many times.
Well, I think it also could just be a snowballing, right, of a name. And and I think that's one thing that the 90 minutes actually highlights very well, is you get little moments and multiple reasons why the things converge upon a name for a target. Normally in the episodes, there's not enough time to be like, this person's the target because, this person thought this person thought this. It's just, there's one simple reason. That's all that you got time to show. Here you had J Maya was being pinned with the Sifu vote. I think this would be another canonical lesson, I think, for future survivors. Don't take the heat for any bad for any bad happenings unnecessarily.
For
right?
people
She's
who
like,
want to blindside you. But she didn't. Like, I think for J Maya, like her position, she was never aware of it the entire game, and it's just like impossible to play with that as a basis. I feel.
And I will say also, speaking of J Maya's, do you think J Maya, the first time J Maya felt vulnerable was when Caleb threw out her
Yeah.
name at Tribal. That was like the first time that, and little
Yep.
does she know, she was the alternate target, right?
Yeah.
So I think that it was not on her radar that I think she was even at that point.
Yeah.
But so I guess back to my point of it snowballing, there's the Sifu votes, and then you have the Austin sandwich thing, and the same with the amulet decision in general. People use that as a reason to say, "Oh, look how strategic she is," right? Little tiny things, right? It's like, well, the Sifu thing is more of a deal, but like these things converge, and then it becomes a name, and that name is the target, and that's much more real to what happens out there. Like for my season, like Elizabeth was not targeted for any one reason at this equivalent merge vote. It was a lot of little reasons that any one of them wouldn't have mattered. But it's when people are looking for a name, Carl didn't like stuff about the bed, or like that, how the bed was made, or little things like that, right? And so that's much more true, and you get to see it at home as to how it snowballs into a name and therefore a vote.
Yeah, so many things. I feel like, firstly, for J Maya and the amulet, I said this last week. If you feel desperate and you feel your game needs an amulet, you are least likely to be able to activate that amulet. It's a paradox. Like, that's why you don't go for it. Like, if you need it, you can't get it. So
Well,
I
that'll be
think we saw
cursed.
that play out. Yeah,
I
it's
think
terrible.
you're talking about the meta of this. Like, if the amulet ever shows up, and there are super fans on the show, and there no doubt will be, because about 90% of the show are super fans these
100%.
days.
Yeah.
And there are people who are like, sandwich. I don't want
Well, they
Austin
should have
coming to
done
my
that
home.
anyway. It's
Yeah,
crazy
yeah.
that they did it. Like, they
Well,
saw High Andrea go at 8 and 7. Like, we've seen this play out. We know it's a bounty. We've talked about it for years. And they still, as super fans, were like, ooh, shiny, So really bad decision, I think, from J Maya and Kelly there. But yeah,
I agree. I mean, like, you step back, you look at it, you're like, man, the amulet is a terrible thing to have. Sandwiches are good to have. That makes sense from our perspective. But I think this is the show's own messaging getting in the heads of the players. I mean, the show is if you ever made a decision that you sit out for food in a challenge, and you go home, the show treats you like you're the biggest idiot in the world. How dare you not try? How dare you not intentionally deprive yourself for the smallest edge in the game? And that's so when the choice is posed in that way, you get the sense that, oh, the show loves risk taking. The show loves self-imposed deprivation. That is what Survivor is, after all. We're volunteering to starve. And so I think that what goes into people's head by default, if you have a decision in front of you that's food or strategy, default you choose strategy. So in that moment, you have to basically say, whoa, this isn't even a strategic advantage at all, to actually overwhelm that general gist of what you should do.
Yeah, they should have looked at it like, oh, in this one decision, I get something bad and no sandwich. In the other decision, I get a sandwich and I don't get the curse. Like, so two good things. So, it's not put that way.
I mean, it's not put that way, and also, like, it's just the way it's framed by Jeff. It's the sandwich wasn't a strategic advantage of a different type. The sandwich is a temptation. That's the way it's framed, and so again, this is where I imagine Shannon out there is able to separate these things from a lot of experience. I think that the narrative thrust of the show can shape the decision making. I mean, this impacted me a little bit. When I had an opportunity to sit out for food or do a challenge, there's some part of me is like, don't sit out for the nachos. You're gonna look like I'm done sitting up. Yeah, I mean, that's its own decision making. So yeah, but that's so. I think that the show's own meta, the sort of enforced meta, the narrative of it, is one of never give up, never stop trying, always fight. That's its ethos.
Kind of wish the show knew what it did was so funny. Like, I don't think they're aware of the fact of, like, we put something really bad in and then tricked them into taking it. Like, they probably think the amulet is good, but we know that they just, like, took a bounty instead of sandwiches for no reason. So not a great decision there. I do agree, just going back to many things you've said, Maya, watching it back, I think learned a lot. I think she goes out thinking, I'm good with Reba, but Caleb puts my name out for some reason, maybe sees me as less of a threat, more low-hanging fruit, maybe a little bit less connected, but I'm still in pretty good. And then just because my name is out in this chaotic live tribal, I go. I think watching it back, she never would have known that she wasn't as in with Reba and that they had put her name out and Caleb was only responding to that. So I feel for her experience, because going on the unanimous shot in the dark after never getting a foot in is just painful all around for Maya. For Drew, who you mentioned of like why the thinking moves on, I am most on board with Drew's thinking through this episode of the Rebas for sure, because they doesn't want to be congenial. I disagree with it. They're all going before even the challenge. Who knows? Like Drew could be vulnerable at that point. So it's good, maybe. I think a little premature, but it's maybe good to just have a name where if that person's vulnerable with you, a couple of these names flying around, Bruce becomes one, Maya, it's going to all fall on that person if you're feeling a little squeezed out in a tight group. That's how the name comes up. Don't fully agree with it, but that's the whole tribe, and it's on everyone. More on Julie and Dee, who are like really throwing it early. Then, in wanting to be congenial, once Bellow, which we'll talk about because I disagree with it too, but once Bellow are so hard on Caleb, he's like, I can get a better thing and still be congenial with Bellow. So still get more of a win with Caleb, who should have been, you would think with Bellow, or is at least in between talking to everyone, to gain more without putting people off. So still within that congenial mindset, which is a mindset I disagree with, but still within that culture, but getting more of a win. So for Drew's credit, he moves in a way that I think makes sense with that. And then he gets it done because Caleb was the unanimous vote. So I'm going to give credit to Drew there. But I have a couple of issues still with this Caleb plan. Firstly, I prefer the Bellow war. That's clear. Secondly, Emily. What are we doing with Emily? Because firstly, we can't leave her out. That's an aggressive way to lose a number you've worked really, really hard for. But cluing her in was clearly pretty dicey. Are they misreading that, or are they just out of options? I feel like, having that uncertainty around what they can do with Emily makes this a very, very risky move, because she does go to Caleb and gives him the opportunity to throw everything at the wall. And that's eventually what saves him. So I think that that's really dicey. I also think that they can't split. There's been a lot of like, why weren't votes thrown? How is this a unanimous vote? They're going to have to revote because no one threw a vote. For Reba, maybe it makes a little bit more sense because, again, they're pretty much all immune. It's just Dee. Her name's not coming up. It's just a shot in the dark for Caleb that they're worried about. Probably not an idol. They're probably okay where they can go back and revote a Maya, and even then a shot in the dark would have to hit. They seem pretty insulated. For Maya, she should be throwing a vote, but she's completely unaware of her position. And for Jake and Kelly, I would think they maybe think that Maya is so much the name that they feel comfortable. But you would think that you would take something into your own hands to throw a vote. But they can't split a vote on Caleb, because on who? Definitely not doing Emily. They're trying to keep her in so much they're giving her the information. Don't want to do Maya. Like, at the point where you're keeping her, don't also then lose her. Although knowing Maya, she probably just goes right back to Reba. She was so loyal to Reba. You can't, no point throwing a vote on a Bellow and kind of starting a Bellow war that you haven't actually started and you haven't actually won. So it was this kind of specific move that had to be all on Caleb. It made it, it maybe put some vulnerabilities, although Reba has so much power, around not being able to split, putting a lot of power possibly in Caleb's hands, and just having nothing that they can do with Emily because they can't leave her out. They clearly couldn't keep her in. And I feel like the difficulties with that for me mean that there's a lot of issues with this vote for Caleb.
So I have so many thoughts about the Emily angle on this. I think that to sort of round out the Drew side of this, I mean, as good a communicator as Drew is, I think that there's a little bit of enigma for me how he thinks about the game in an interesting way, not in a bad way. I think he's got a different view of the game than I'm used to seeing from these kind of strategic, these strategist style players. Whether it's saying no to an alliance.
Yeah, it's like Savage. I feel like it's Andrew Savage style, but it's Steven body. Like, it's like the brain of Andrew Savage, to a degree, went into like the affect of Steven, where he's like, war, I feel like it's old school and it's binary, but in a way that I think, like, if you're going to win the war, maybe win the war.
I should expound upon this a bit more, because I'm not even saying, it's a bad thing, because like one thing, I think there's an interesting, we talk about the meta game, this evolution of the game from season to season. And the game is the thinking about Survivor, I think, has become so homogenized. Everyone comes in and knows, for the most part, the things you do and do not do, the basics. You do not tell someone you're going to vote them out. The little things that we take for granted now that were not obvious years ago, right? But there are very few hard and fast rules of Survivor. And if everyone is playing a certain way, which is kind of the established, these rules make sense, do this, that, or the other thing, sometimes juking a little bit in a different direction can play off the meta very effectively. So I think this was talked about in previous podcasts, that maybe the authenticity of a Drew saying, I'm not going with that alliance, might actually endear him to his own alliance members or something by being authentic. I don't know. That there's that possibility. But when it comes to Drew, I think there's some layers to the decision I think I'm not privy to. But one thing that could be the case for why getting rid of Caleb is he seems to be cultivating a relationship with Emily from their time at the Swap Tribe. And knowing that there are these two Lulus on the bottom, you get rid of Caleb, then you get rid of one of Emily's other options. And so it's possible the theory of the case for Austin and Drew together is that, Austin, it's me and you against the world. We have D, who believes that you have a confessional from D saying that Austin and Drew are the two people. I want to make sure it's not them, right? So they appear to be the center of gravity for so many of these alliances. They also have Emily, who joined her on that vote after seemingly betraying, in the mind of Kendra, the Bellow alliance. There might be some other hanger-ons that they may be able to pull in as well from the old Reba. I think we see them just from the narrative as the strategic center there. So if they view it that way, they could be, okay, who are my options? Let's make sure they have nowhere else to go but us. So that could be what's going on with Drew, and which takes us, I guess, to Emily, and it'll be his relationship with Emily, which we can talk more about Emily's decisions.
Wouldn't you think, though, that like having J. Meyer is like an option where she's seemingly like got nowhere else to go or is with you? Like I find that so confusing, because I feel like for Emily, I wonder how much has been painted about her relationship with Caleb. I mean, look, there are 2 or 3 people who came out of this tribe. If they're obscuring that, more power to them. But telling Emily it was necessary.
Yeah, it was necessary.
But also
absolutely.
it was also it was move destroying. So it was like a point where they just, I feel like, could not get past it. And at that point, I feel like the move becomes untenable, because there's no one they can really split on. There is no one they can split on really with J. Meyer either, because again, you don't want to go in these different directions and show your cards when you're doing one thing. With sacrificing J. Meyer, you don't want to split on a Lulu, you don't want to split on a Bellow, but they can blindside J. Meyer. Even with Bellow, they would not have the numbers to split. They can blindside a Bellow. So the lack of being able to do the blindside clearly and give someone the opportunity of something like a shot in the dark, or give Caleb that space, I feel was like a point against this move. So yeah, I mean, that's mostly it for Reba. I feel like I've dragged Reba a lot, but I honestly disagree. I'm seeing the chat saying that I'm being, too objective, and this isn't, how people play. That's what we're here to do. Like, we're Monday morning quarterback. I'm not being like a human being here. Like, this is optimal strategy, and I felt it was suboptimal.
That's absolutely a completely valid way to view the game, and I think that if you were to concoct we were to construct an ideal Survivor player, like some kind of robot together, Shannon, or something like that.
I think that's the closest we had was you, maybe, Christian.
If
anyone's going to do that, it's you. You are literally like a robot engineer, right? Like, was that the word we need you to create the robot player. Like, that's on you.
I mean, and that's kind of like, if we were to construct this in this hypothetical environment, and what is it? We have the ability to say, what is it thinking on the inside, and how does it exude on the outside, right? And what you're describing is the planning of what is likely to move me furthest in a way that's going to maximize my chances for success. And your theory of the case, which I'm not going to argue with, is I think is well reasoned, is that, hey, just keep our numbers strong, right? We have a strong number, assuming what we see on the show is a fair reflection of reality. That makes sense. And in order to achieve that, how do you deal with all of these sort of messy perceptions people have of each other? all of these little tidbits, right? I mean, like it's so many tiny things that can again mount up to a vote. So how do you accrue them into a narrative of, J Maya is so strategic, because she didn't want the sandwich. It's like it's almost nothing, right? You can therefore the spin radius of how much you can spin any event in the Survivor is almost infinite to make it seem like you can make something like, oh, that person took the sandwich, but they just made it look like they didn't want to be strategic. They're so strategic, they're not even trying to look strategic, right? You can just make up a story like that.
I find that when I podcast, because I'll be like, I'll say something, and then like I feel the guest will sometimes say something that also makes sense. I'm like, oh, both things make sense. Maybe nothing makes sense. Like you can spin anything any which way, really.
Sure. And the mere fact that yes, these are people, and the fact that that there are all kinds of things that influence decision making that are not objective. That does not that does not make the objective analysis, or at least the attempt for objective analysis, worthless. Yeah. It's actually it's so. I mean, this is sort of this is the tug of war that you kind of have to navigate in the game. That you have some internal calculation, and then you affect it in a way that is going to maximize your chance of getting a vote to go the way you want it to go by whatever means necessary.
Yeah, and that's the beauty of Survivor as well. Like that is like we come on here and say, here's what we debate what we think the optimal move is around perfect awareness and understanding, and all of that stuff is anyway vague because Survivor is gray and human. And that's what's like, how are you reading that on J Maya? Like, I think you're wrong, but I get as a human that you've just got it into your head and now you've spoken about it so much that it's something that is real to you, even though I, highly disagree with it in this context. But the humanity of the mistakes is what makes Survivor so great. The fact that Wu will make a decision like he did to take Tony, which is so human. It's fallible because it's human, is so interesting. And it's obviously something we criticize in terms of like optimal gameplay. And in terms of that suboptimal gameplay, I'd love to just, the last thing on Reba, and then we'll drag some more people, but for Reba, where's the responsibility pie? Who can we order the 5 Rebas in terms of like, I think like with J Maya is the worst move, like who's really wrong here? Because we've seen, like, I think Drew's okay. Like as we've spoken about, we understand kind of how the thinking moves along. He goes for Caleb. Sifu, honestly, I get as well. Like, he's not really going to benefit from Reba strong, and he has like an actively super negative with J Maya that's legitimate in a way it simply is not with the rest of Reba and J Maya. Then we look at the others. Like for Austin, he's safe, but he can bury his vote. He can move further with the amulet, although he also can with Kelly. He can sacrifice, kind of pile on with someone like J Maya. So there's something there, but I criticize it. For D, she's the one who could be vulnerable in this position. So there's something there, but I criticize it. It's also before we get to the challenge. And for Julie, like who's now like the one most of anyone, like Julie's relationship with J Maya, when they're coming on the boats and J Maya's like, let's do a welcome sign with our fingers. And Julie's like, I'm just too tired. And poor J Maya is out there writing welcome on the beach. I'm like, J Maya cannot get one thing from this tribe. So for Julie, who does to it in her defense, throw out Lulu at the feast, I think I put a lot on her. Is there like, do you blame people more for some have this incorrect thinking and then kind of give others grace?
There's actually the moments before, just like logistically, the moments before a merge or a tribe gathering or whatever you want to call it, mergatory, whatever it's called these days, mergatory, are actually pretty interesting. Those moments, because you get the sense like if you have 10 minutes to leave, you got to get everything you need done by that time. Now, players these days know when these big events are going to happen. They are pretty much scheduled, and you have a decent idea. You can guess. Feels like a merge is going to happen today. And so how people act
day 13 or day 12, Kristen, the game's almost over. Let's hop to it,
Yeah, exactly. So and so one, it was interesting this time because Bruce had to go run and get an idol with minutes to go. That was cool to see. I bet that stuff happens a lot more than you see. I know what happened when I was out there. I imagine I'm curious to talk with other players that in the last moments, minutes or hours before you think you're going to swap tribes, are people looking for idols more? Just to make, hey, we got to get it before we leave this beach, which, by the way, we never got the Bellow idol. If I understand this right, there's only 2 idols currently in play if you don't count the amulet. The Bellow one was never found. This is the re-hiding of the original Lulu.
Yeah.
which is Sabaya's idol, which Bruce does not have to sack a vote to get down to the final 5, by the way.
We can talk about that as well, the mechanisms of that vote.
Yeah. And that's what do people are they interested in doing and not interested in doing in those final moments can tell you a lot. If they're done and they're tired of talking to you, they don't want to do something fun like that. That could be a signal that you can use as a player to be like, they don't really care to be around me. And by the way, good on Bruce for realizing no one wants to talk to him. That's another signal, right? It's similar, that's but similar to that. And if you find that one move that I remember being deployed on my season was that right before a swap, we were like, or a merge, hey, we're all family here. Let's one of us find an idol, so let's go group search together. And the one person who definitely did not want to go on a group search was the guy who had an idol. So so you can get some sense right before this impending big event, how people are acting, and it can give you some motivations as to what they have, what they don't have, what they're interested in doing, what not interested in doing. We got a little bit of that today.
I love it. I'm so lucky. I'm talking to Christian, everyone, on the Know-It-Alls. Let's just take a moment. Let's drag Bellow, because Bellow, who I also disagree with most. I mean, look, it's very individual and everyone had kind of different intentions. We'll get to it. We'll break it down. But I'm going to give Bellow some more grace than Reba. They're in a harder spot. They don't have the outright numbers that I feel like Reba should have. They have some more legitimate infighting. Like the way that Reba are going for J Maya, I think is a wrong read and nonsensical. Going for Bruce and kind of turning on Bruce, while I did think, it's either going to be J Maya or Bruce when I saw the challenge breakdown of the groups, I was like, one of these tribes is about to be saved from themselves in terms of sacrificing a member. In saying that, Bruce is a legitimate liability. I'm not nearly as hard on sacrificing Bruce, especially when you're down in the numbers anyway, especially when there's such a fracture that it actually could retain Katurah more. And when he's also alienating someone like Caleb, the instinct to sacrifice Bruce for me is not the same as J Maya, but at its best, I would hope that, groups aren't going to fracture or sacrifice a member so immediately and retain some power. So they have less power than Reba. In saying that, they were handed the move on a silver platter. They were happy about it. In a perfect world, if they have the numbers, I feel, you want to take out someone like a D, let's try win the war. But they don't have the numbers to do that. That's why when you are gifted J Maya, you really have to push for that. And you can put it all on does Drew have the power? Is he doing this? No. Some of the loudest voices were Bruce and Kendra, who are sacrificing Caleb, who Caleb is being wishy-washy. He is an active double agent or swing, or he's not definitely with you. He's never voted with you. He is, Bruce is putting him off, but, Bruce is responding to the fact that Caleb is put off by him. There is some negativity there. In saying that, it's still a maybe, I feel, over J Maya, who is a Reba. She's a low-hanging fruit Reba that they are willing to sacrifice. But I still feel look at those numbers for me. And I also feel that, you might want to take out someone who you can't predict like a Caleb, maybe over a J Maya. But I just think when those numbers are so threatening from Reba, take the gift to they're, I feel making such an unforced error against themselves that I feel that's something that they would really, I would say, want to do. So to get rid of Caleb here and to be pushing it so hard for someone like a Bruce and Kendra in Bellow with them, Bellow have not been able to make any ally through the swap other than Caleb. Kendra clearly didn't. They've only other swap with one person. It is a social failing to want to immediately get rid of that person or feel the need to do that when all you've had as a social opportunity is Caleb to now, and now he's someone that you have to get rid of. For me, I feel like J Maya is very much the move. It was gifted for them. Let's stop throwing out Caleb. Let's crack into Reba and then start to dismantle them rather than, for me, taking out at least a maybe, and then you try consolidate with Caleb rather than just throwing him out there.
Yeah, I think that's very astute. I think that when you are in Bellow's position, and especially I saw the fear in Jake's eyes in that conversation.
Yeah, that's
with
true
D.
as well. Yeah,
they
should both be scared, so that's fair.
Yeah, I mean that J Maya instantly became the path of least resistance. I mean, if you're offered a name other than you by someone's own ally and you believe it, you go for that. I mean, other moves could expend political capital that you might just not have, or you put yourself on the radar for being able to change the vote. It's very uncommon that you can change the direction of a vote and not have your fingerprints on it. When you can, that's actually a sign of skill. I think of like an Omer at the Mergatory in 42, and I think to a degree, actually, Caleb seemed to do that reasonably well this vote. Well, even though if you disagree with the choice of target, he was able to switch the whole vote toward everyone. So he clearly has power there. But Jake's position, he took the gift and is like, oh, someone is not me, someone who I have no ties to, someone who has ties to the person I'm talking to. Absolutely, you go that way. You'd have to really do some trick shot maneuvering to then put it onto on someone else. And do you want to stick up your neck that high? These 13 vote tribals are nuts. There's so many people. You probably don't get, like, I had a 3-day merge vote. I talked to Kara for a grand total of 45 seconds. There's so many people you're talking to and trying to do. You don't have the time. And so as soon as to banter around with everyone, now the merge is 2 days. The 2 whatever they call it this time. So again, he takes the gift. They say we pile on this vote until at some point Drew switched it in a different direction, right? Makes sense to me.
Yeah. I think your point is good because Bellow are not a monolith. Clearly, they have Katurah and Bruce in that tribe. They can't stand each other. So yeah, I mean, my problem is mainly with Bruce and Kendra really throwing out Caleb there. I feel like for Bellow, Jake and Kelly and Katurah, to Katurah's credit, she's trying to maintain that bond that she's created individually, and for the tribe, credit there. For Kelly and Jake, I feel like they, of anyone, should be the target, and they're clearly not, and that's probably Reba's fault. But firstly, a credit to them for, needing to pile on to what feels right, and that first is Jemiah and then becomes Caleb, and I feel like they have less agency to survive, so I definitely blame them less. And I honestly want to give a lot of credit to them for surviving, especially Kelly, who I feel should have been the target, who I feel made a really bad decision with the amulet to put herself in the firing line last week and survives through this, through probably social capital accrued through the first half of the game that makes her just way too scary to touch within this congenial kind of culture. So I do want to give credit there, but it is mostly Bruce and Kendra. I mean, Bruce, I have questions for Bruce. Firstly, when he says people want him gone because he's a celebrity, is he saying that ironically? I hope so.
I believe he actually put the
he did do
literal
the quote.
On,
I know.
unquote, right?
Okay. I want to give the grace. I do.
I get it. So he said. So I think that there's some self-awareness in that, but it is a narrative for the season that he comes in and I find that so funny. Imagine you got to play a little bit for one season. I guess a memorable exit. And then you come in and you're like you're the celebrity the entire time. And I do let's use this as, again, another opportunity to underscore the importance of narrative framing on this show. I mean, it became the narrative early on that he is the celebrity, and it could have very easily gone a different way if people weren't pushing it that way. So like and I think it took on a life of its own, much like Emily's comments to him on the mat. So, but back to I think that's what's going on. Again, it's the fungibility of narratives. But what's in terms of the choice of target for Bruce, again, it is interesting and similar that, like, I mean, it's no secret that Katurah is not a massive fan of Bruce. He may be a celebrity, but not her celebrity, I guess. And so, but that really parlayed into some real strategic friction. Like even if I try to remember if Katurah was actually targeting Bruce. I know there was friction over she wanted to vote Jemiah and keep Caleb. That she was, and then she said, "I'm voting Jemiah 100%. That's definitely what I'm doing tonight." Clearly, it changed.
Yeah. I think she said Bruce is an idiot. Bruce is stupid. So yeah.
That's a pretty par for the course, I think, for her confessionals there. But that's so I think that, yes, the choices of targets were. I would love to hear some of the exits when we get them from these players. What was the thinking at the Mergatory? Because I guess kind of refreshed but surprised at the degree to which people were willing to engage in friendly fire. What was the narrative? Do people think that there only are core groups of 2 or 3 and everyone else is swappable and expendable? Maybe that's the feeling this season, that loyalty is not a thing for most of them. I think that,
Mm.
but that's not for all of them, clearly, because Kendra felt betrayed by Emily. Emily has used loyalty as a bargaining chip for saving Caleb, saying that, "Hey, you'll have my support for my never-ending thanks if you save Caleb." And famously, then Kendra said, "That's not how Survivor works."
Yeah, I
Emily
also
says,
thought that wasn't great socially. That's not our survival. I thought that was too harsh.
yeah.
You
Oh,
know?
there's layers. There are layers of analysis you can do with, again, that one conversation. Layers of it, right? Is it true that how Survivor works?
It
Do you
probably isn't
say
how
if that's
survival works
true?
in
Is
Kendra's
it,
fairness. Yeah.
is it true? It's not. Do you say that? Do you respond to that? Do you actually even mean it to begin with? Right. That's. I think any conversation that you have that is not a confessional, you should take with a grain of salt, because there's so much island BS that you just say things that happen to support the narrative you want to push at the moment. You know.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I mean, a couple of things. I mean, I want to talk about Emily as an option, but for someone like Bruce, you could say he should go for Caleb because Caleb, we hear, is coming for him. To be fair, Bruce's own allies are coming for him. I think it's like that's the social failing. He's openly confronting Caleb to the point where he's tanked what, again, should be that social opportunity so hard that now we between needing to take out a potential ally and empowering Reba when they're giving you the opportunity to actually fracture them, or keeping someone in the game who wants you out. But like, why are you in that position where you've made like such a bad individual connection that you might have to empower another group to be like communally against you? So I think for Bruce, questions abound in terms of just the social approach, and you see how few strategic options and how you limit yourself, I feel like, in just playing the game that way, in the way that people are perceiving him. I'd love to ask you as well, Emily is an option. Emily is an option here because Lulu were kind of brought up together, especially for, like, obviously not for Reba, who are working with Emily, but knowing that Emily is more with Reba. Clearly, she just voted with them in terms of the revenge that Kendra wants, in terms of being able maybe to try and paint it as congenial. She's a Lulu. Wouldn't that even be better than a Caleb? Maybe they just feel it's much less of a possibility because Emily is, like, at this point, like a proxy Reba. But I would just think that at that point for Bellow, then do you take away Caleb's other connection that could tie him to Reba, and then you assure him for yourself, and then weaken Caleb while still keeping that as a possible connection? Or did they just not think it was possible? Like, do you think there's something there? Like, again, I'm not on board with Caleb. I think do J-Maya 20 times out of 10. But even if you're not going to do that, I still think they went for the wrong Lulu, even within, going outside of J-Maya.
So to answer, I guess, two points. The reason Bruce, I think, acted that way, I think he was scared. I think he was scared. And I mean, not that, I mean, he correctly read, no one is talking to me. And that is a bad thing at such a tumultuous upcoming vote. So the reason it happened was because he was scared. That doesn't necessarily mean that's how you should go about that thing, but that's what happens. And again,
the infallibility of humanity.
Yeah, I mean, so I mean, and good on him for realizing that. I hope he parlays. I think that, and I think that there's something. I hope he parlays that information of him being left out into a greater need to change up his game, because he's right now, as a lot of people willing to get rid of him, I'm not sure he quite knows it's that bad. Back to your Emily point, why not get rid of Emily? I think, again, this narrative gets simplified into who is the threat. And this vote was about getting rid of a threat. And J-Maya was cast as a threat for being too strategic, but really, it's for whatever reason we don't quite see, she was on the outs of that Reba tribe, and the narrative was that she was a threat. Caleb was viewed as a threat. Emily was not viewed as a threat. I think that it came down to that. And when it comes to selling, talk about Caleb's salesmanship, you got to simplify what you want to do down to a simple concept that you can sell. I mean, Caleb can tell me better than me what about salesmanship. I work in academia. I don't make money on anything. but the for selling things. But I think that but Emily comes across as such a non-threat at this point compared to Caleb because we see him being a social butterfly, as we've said many times. That is just a simpler thing. Why would we get rid of the threat? Why would we keep the threat when we would and keep the non-threat? I think it just came to that very simple calculus. And all of the little connection things, connection here to here, there to there, there to there, that's much harder to keep track of. Again, 13 people running around who you barely know. And so, and how do you, and let's say you do come across, let's say you do a Shannonian analysis of who to get rid of, right? How do you sell that to other people who might be thinking on a very straightforward way? And like, what?
Yeah.
And, yeah.
Hmm.
And how hard can you push?
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that. Firstly, also, Bruce is in the chat. He says he was being sarcastic. Thank you, Bruce. Hi, Bruce.
Great. Hey, Bruce. Episode. I knew it. I knew it.
You know, Chizy points for Bruce coming up, but
Good read, agree. Bruce. Not being talked to, by the way.
Yeah,
classic.
And also, it's true. Caleb was coming for him, and he was then coming for Caleb, and Caleb was again then unanimously voted out. So maybe some stuff there. Who else is in the chat? We should maybe have a little bit more grace for.
Yeah, we got more questions. We have lots of questions. So.
Well, in terms of what you're saying, in terms of the threat level of Caleb and Emily, I think we should get into Lulu here because it's what Caleb is saying, right? Like he's the big threat. He's Caleb. He was talked about as a threat from the preseason when Brandon was saying make him the first draft pick. You know, like he is a sparkly person. And I've talked before about these sparkly people. Every Survivor winner that I know is sparkly. I'd be like, I'd vote out that sparkly person. Like they shine. And that clearly is Caleb. It is intrinsic in a way that I almost can't blame him. Like that's who he is. It was clear in the preseason. I can probably blame other things, but you know, they're coming for him here because he's the big threat. But as he says, it's like, it's kind of a cyclical thing. It's like, if you're all voting for me unanimously, how much agency do I have? How big of a threat am I? Compared to Emily, who doesn't seem as big a physical threat, who's being very social, but is still not Caleb level salesman, but has numbers. And is actually, if you look at Emily, never considered here, that is social capital. Like that is social standing. That's a threat. In a way, like the fact that Bellow, I don't think could achieve that in the way that they achieved Caleb points to how much more threatening Emily is than Caleb right now. So it's kind of this backwards logic where, oh, he's going because he's the biggest threat, but he's also the easiest person we can paint this on, which means he's very much not threatening. So in terms of Caleb, he was voted out unanimously tonight. You know, that's not great. Where do we put the blame here other than the sparkle? You know, he is playing both sides. He is getting clocked. I think there's a little bit of a lapse in awareness in getting clocked because he's talking about how he's the golden retriever and everyone knows he's not. Where do you put blame on how it gets to the point for Caleb where he just got 11 votes that needed to be nullified by a 1-6 shot in the dark?
Yeah, it's a tough spot for Caleb, and I love to sort of compare Emily and Caleb's positions at the moment. That's a great comparison point given they both started the same tribe and the last two remaining. I mean, Caleb got out of the situations that he got into before by being that charming person. He succeeded on those small tribe situations by being so effortlessly charming, by being open to Emily, by making these overtures that were reciprocated, right? And that's what got him out of a jam. And it's very hard to pivot out of that when you're at the merge. You have to switch your mentality entirely and say, it's not just about me being charming anymore. I had to fade into the background, and I feel like I'm speaking from a little bit of experience here. You know, on
you're a sparkly person, Christian.
Oh, thank you.
It's hard to be sparkly. I think that was true.
Oh, that's very kind. It's very kind of you. I mean, but even just from an action, let's just assume it's let's take inherent traits out of it, that because he clearly has inherent talents for this, right? I could totally understand if he said, I got out of all these tribals via my powers of persuasion, of getting people to like me and wanting to work with me. I'm going to, and now I'm again in a tough situation. I'm going to dial that to 11 and do it at the merge. And it instantly becomes a complete target. It becomes a thing that gives you a target, right? Let's assume for a moment that if he had a way to blend into the background, he wouldn't have been such a target this time, right? It requires that mental switch. And I think that I think that at every major game event, whether it's mergatory or a swap, you gotta take a second to yourself while you're on the boat, coming back to camp, and take a deep breath and say, what needs to be my posture now? And clearly, people are thinking along these lines. Everyone's giving confessionals about, on the outside, I look like this. On the inside, I want to murder everyone. I feel like 5 or 6 people had that exact similar confessional this episode, right?
Daggers, golden retrievers, all of that. Yeah.
Right. Yes. We have all these, right?
That's
So
the
that's the meta. And so I think that he's trying to get is in that mode for get me allies, get me allies, get me allies, and that happened to make him stand out. And I think that that's what it is. So I mean, in that case, I'm blaming him, but really, what I'm coming at it from a point of understanding. This is how you get into that situation, and how understandable it is. You just keep doing that thing that got you that far, right? And so, whereas like an Emily, and I think that Emily has worked herself into perhaps a really great position from my standpoint. They had at tribal council all the votes against Caleb completely negated. Who do we vote out? You know, we can vote out the one low Lulu.
Yeah, I agree.
Gone. Just get rid of them. Easy punt. You know, she didn't start with any of us, or J Maya, and it's unanimous for J Maya, right? So that says something for how Emily has maneuvered herself. And I would say that it's even especially impressive considering the way that she acquits herself in these scenes that we see are things that I would assume would put a target on her. Like when she says, "Oh, I'll do anything to save Caleb." I think a lot of survivor strategy people like yourself, Shannon, would be like, "That's not what you say. You say, oh, you with someone other than me? I mean, of course, I agree with your plan. Absolutely. In the group, you agree with the plan. You don't vocally say anything but that plan, please, because he's my closest ally and not you." Right. And it's like, so that I'm curious what you think about that. Like, but when she put that out there, it's like, oh, wow, she is really close to Caleb. All the more reason I would want to get rid of Caleb. And she's not really close to us. So that would, if anything, raise my radar on me. I think Jake was in that scene. Jake was the one that I think was delivering the news, which I think there's.
I think it was Drew. I think she was with Reba. It was Drew,
she was Reba?
Yeah, and then it was the Reba people, and then Kendra came. I'm pretty sure.
Got it. Okay. So yeah, all right. I'll go.
That was when her face was like, you know, hating the Caleb plan. I was like, I can't believe they're telling this to Emily right now.
Yes. Yeah, and I think they had to, like you said, they had to, because if they didn't, then she would feel blindsided. Yeah, they lose her, right?
Just vote her out.
Yeah. I guess they can vote her out. Then that's 2 punches.
Like just vote her out now. I mean, like if you're gonna lose it to that extent, like but like you would never want to lose that number from the game or from your alliance.
That's a good point. But the fact that she stayed and got nary only the one nominal vote against her from the person going out the door, that's very good. She gets a lot of credit from me for how she's positioned herself. So it's sort of in contrast with Caleb, where Caleb, despite being often in a rough situation, has flourished in his way to get out of it. Emily seemed to have kind of just barely scraped by. And that's almost the optimal amount of flourishing you should do in the pre-merge is you just barely scrape by. You do just barely enough talented things to make sure that you're at the merge. And therefore you have the most room to maneuver once you get there.
In saying that about Caleb, this is the second time that he's been out the door for being that much of a threat, and Emily had to save him. Now, extreme credit to the social capital that he built with Emily that has paid dividends, but he's been on the outs just for that threat level. And I do think for him, I put less blame on it because I feel it's so innate. Like compared to how Tika were doing that, look at Tika, and to their extraordinary credit, they played into it, but they knew Carson seemed young, maybe you respected less. Carolyn seemed out there, maybe you respected less. Jam eccentric, respected less. Oh no, wait, they're all amazing players and they're all playing you, but you just don't see it. Caleb does not have that luxury because he's just such an out and out clear preseason threat. But for Emily, I loved what she did. I don't have anything to really disagree with. I mean, because there's a lot in it. She describes she's having to play this kind of middle game between not wanting Reba to think she has other better allies, which she does, but also really not wanting to lose Caleb. And I think her connection with Caleb, I don't want to cut bait here for her. Maybe because I love that duo, but no, strategically, I think she needs that number as much as he might not have agency right now. letting him go here does feel like a huge loss for her. So the way that she was able to kind of go between not, putting off her alliance enough, like trying to maybe subtly, try and save him, but not actively putting her foot down, and then giving him the opportunity to throw things at the wall, eventually play a shot in the dark. Like, she's the one who saves him, and she votes for him. So that's that level of, like, we see it often, mole votes, especially in Australian Survivor and even Survivor South Africa. We see it globally, where you vote one way and hope it's going another way. Someone's playing an idol or something else is happening. And she did one thing while very much doing another thing. And she, as much as she votes for Caleb, absolutely saves him here. I think that she does need to push as hard as she does without it being, like, really clear and public to Reba. And as you said, she's in this vulnerable group. She's not even doing it while being immune. She's in this really, really tricky position that we talk about has, strike fear into the hearts of so many players at these half immune votes. She's there, and you would think, oh, Caleb knew to play shot in the dark. Oh, he's putting everyone out there at tribal council. This man clearly knows he's going. The second that he was throwing things out, I'm like, oh, Caleb's gone. Like, he knows he's gone. They should be saying, I wonder how you found out, Caleb. Was it Emily? Well, now you suffer for it. Now you're the one who will go because he saved himself with a shot in the dark. And the fact that she doesn't, and that those conversations are just never going to happen in this live tribal format because they haven't been happening on the beach, shows ridiculous social standing. Like, there was risk, but there was bravery and I guess the right read on the stuff to not even split a vote and really show how much you knew about Caleb's shot in the dark and how in cahoots you are, not upset other people when she's trying to be congenial and really, like, after a hard start, get in with people. She has faith that she won't be the name, and to her extraordinary social credit, she pulls that off. And I just think that I have no, like, not throwing the vote, warning him, still voting for him. I have no qualms with any of it. I think Emily, since she turned it around, has been phenomenal. She has survived 5 tribal councils. For Bruce and Katura, who have never been vulnerable, if they don't win immunity, then, like, if they've survived 5 tribal councils, they will be at the final 6. That's how much game Emily has had to play before people have even been able to start. And of all the dragging tonight, I'm very impressed with how Emily did today.
She's in a great, she's in a great position, and I agree that back channeling to it was very brave to stick her neck out in that situation when it could have just been her, and she kept an ally, somewhat improbably, but kept an ally as a result of the process. And that's great. I think that the thing that that struck me in that moment was in that conversation in the group, she pushed back really hard in the group to say, please, not Caleb, anybody but that. And then and I think that's just a small tactical nuance, right? But I think this is actually, and this is actually something really interesting by Emily. I think that Emily's another example of a player, and I find this refreshing and maybe an interesting way pretty smart. She is not playing to what is this kind of homogenized, established way of playing Survivor sometimes. Now, that sometimes can be a fool's errand. You can do some really dumb stuff sometimes. Those rules are good. They're good for a reason. But for instance, like objecting in a big group setting in a big way when you're in a minority, that can get you your neck chopped, right? Yet she didn't do it, right? She's also a person who reads the situation of everyone coming back from tribal council. You notice this when you come back from tribal council, someone gets blindsided, and she was like, this person was blindsided. They should be madder than they are. Right? She always says she did that. She did that for Sean. Is it for Sean? She did it for Kendra. They should be really mad. They're not really mad. I don't buy that they're not mad. It's like, yeah, of course, because Sean and Kendra are playing to this established rules that way. Hey, whenever you come back from a blind side, you got to act like it's not a big deal. We'll move forward from that. And she is saying, that's not authentic. I don't buy that. You're not someone who I trust as a consequence, right? So she's kind of bucking this sort of established nature, and see how it works out for her. I mean, because this is grand hypothesis, is probably wrong. Okay, but I'll throw it out there, right? Meta games, we know how people generally play. That's what metagame is, like sort of like how the consensus of people tend to play. What are they thinking in a game? It comes in cycles. I don't care what whether it's a video game or chess or like a competitive chess amongst people or Survivor. There's an established way of thinking that's a shorthand for the overall strategy. Okay, because that's how we think. We have, oh, this is what's important now in the game, and it's like, oh, idols are important, or big alliances are important, or jumping on your alliance is important. It ebbs and flows, right? And if you stay like one step ahead, where you juke out of the way of what everyone else is thinking, that can maybe put you in an interesting strategic position to open up opportunities that otherwise weren't there. And I see that a bit with Drew. I see that a bit with Emily. And I wonder how it works out for the two of them. And maybe I hope my read's not completely wrong on them, but that's what I see when I see them.
Yeah, I think I'm pretty high on how both of them did, especially in this episode, but especially Emily. Let's talk about this a little bit more, getting to some questions. We have a lot of questions, and I feel like we should, probably start answering them. This is more of a statement, but Brian or Alana says, I think we can all agree, though, okay, this seems like it was more in the chat, but I want to talk about the idol anyway, that Bruce is a normal idol because otherwise he would have had to risk it here. Can we talk about this as a mechanism, Christian? A couple of things. Yeah. He would have lost his vote to Wen. Usually it's the merge. We were voting. Yes. And it's not, it's not the risk idol, the sacrifice idol, which is a mechanism I've really enjoyed. We have seen those structures change. We saw Marianne find a non-beware idol in the merge as an example. So we don't necessarily get, this is a pre-merge idol though, and it has a different structure to it. Obviously, it would have to, from a sacrifice standpoint, they don't have that pre-merge tribal council. And there are already questions around what if you find it and never go to tribal council, which many people didn't go to tribal council. But I still think you could change it around, sacrifice it once. It's like you're rewarded for finding it later, which should be something that's worse for you, or that you didn't find it as well. So it kind of feels like a backwards reward there. And then, so he doesn't have to sacrifice it. And I just wonder, how long would he have lost his vote until? I feel like we don't have clarity. Bruce is in the chat, but I feel like don't give us the intel. We save it for the exit, right?
We don't want you to get in any trouble with the CBS overlords.
Bruce's cousin is in the chat. Yeah.
Okay. And I think that so I think the reasoning for why it was done this way is because they really wanted to make sure, production really wanted to make sure that there was a full-fledged idol in the game at the merge, or at least another one. Austin did sack his vote. He sacrificed his vote. And so he had one until the merge, whatever the Tribes of One Beach, the gathering, whatever you want to call it. And I think they didn't want to be in a situation where they had to start re-hiding these things like crazy, and people wouldn't necessarily know that they're out there. And I think that, so they wanted to make sure that someone was going to have an idol that they could have and hang on to, and play deeper into the merge. So I think they said, hey, when we're going to re-hide these idols, we're just going to re-hide them as normal idols. I think that was the decision that was made. And in terms of incentivizing, you're totally right. But in terms of the incentives, but everyone's going to grab that dang that idol anyway. There's not anyone who's going to be like, well, I found this one idol. I'm going to let this one go back and hope the next idol that's hidden, that one's for me. Even the idol literally says beware on it, and people still take it at the first thing. And again, another naming thing. I know we talked about how people have talked about how it's called the beware advantage, and I don't know. I think they just need a different name for it. Maybe the beware message, or something like that. Because it's not an advantage if it's bad. But anyway, that's a little bit of a branding.
It could be good.
Where opportunity, something like they just a little bit of a tweak in the branding. I think there some things need to be named. Is my point. If you're listening, Jeff, so like what is the name of the mergatory, and is it limbo? Are you going to? Is that canon now? Inquiring minds need to know.
Jeff, if you're listening, it doesn't need a new name. The purgatory part is boring and played out. Like, it's just the merge, but it's half immune. That's fine. Like, we're all on the individual, but it's not individual. Like, it doesn't have any material meaning. It is individual. They're all on the, like, the buff might be a symbol, but it's never hit for me. So for me, it's not a naming thing. It's just like a concept thing.
Yeah. So Shannon, Shannon has spoken. She's a global expert. Listen to her expertise. So I think that's what it was. I think that they're like, okay, let's make sure there are votes going deep, idols going deeper into the merge.
That makes sense. We have more questions, which was the one that I wanted. All right. Here we are. I'm doing it. I have it. Okay. Leah Weber says, question, isn't taking out Jay before Kelly a terrible move for Austin? Isn't the bounty bigger on Austin now? Yes. Thank you. I completely agree, Leah, that if he takes out Kelly here, if they make that move, he might either not be able to use, like he might have to use his vote. So he might sacrifice the idol he has, or at least not be able to hide it as well. But then I feel like he pretty much has the amulet idol because J Maya's got nothing. Like at a point where it's just him and J Maya, like she has no agency. Like he could take her out at any time and have an idol once they've just like consolidated some of those numbers. But Kelly is a big player in the game. Bellow could get something going, and he, knows that way less, and it's way scarier. And now I feel like he still has the upper hand, I would say, but it's now I feel Austin versus Kelly for this, where if Kelly goes here, I feel like the idol is pretty much at that point Austin's idol.
Well, so here's a question for you, Shannon. I think we're in agreement that in general, taking that amulet, I mean, it's not a great advantage you want to take, probably a bad idea. But is it a good idea for one person? Like for the person that wasn't like, does somebody win of those three for taking it? Because someone's going to get an idol at one point, mathematically, or unless they all get to the end, which would be hilarious. Like,
well,
so
one already did not. So,
one did not, but for one of, I mean, like let's maybe Austin is a bigger target now, but maybe Austin feels he has more political power with the collective powers of the allies that voted this time, and maybe they find it like if they successfully, let's say Austin successfully gets rid of Kelly, or vice versa, Kelly successfully gets rid of Austin. Was it bad? I mean, I'm not trying to be results oriented, but mathematically, one of them's going to get an idol. Go on. What's your thinking?
No, I feel that for the person who wants it least, it's the best decision, and that's Austin. The person who wants it the least, needs it the least, is the most likely to get it. It is a paradox bounty. In saying that, for Austin, he's got all this other stuff, he's got numbers, and it's not worth the risk. Like, yes, one person is going to have the idol, but through like very treacherous waters to get there through the bounty. So if you feel you don't need it because you have other power, which may be able to get you to be able to, obtain it, it's probably not worth the risk when you have other stuff going on. But I do think there is like an order there of, the less that you want it, the more likely you are to get it. But then it's also probably not worth the risk. So I don't think it's worth it for any of them because, one person's going to get it. But at that point, I feel like it's way too in flux to know if that will be you or if the much more concerning bounty will just make this, a nightmare to begin with.
I feel so. I'm trying to craft the, it's not really devil's advocate. I'm just really trying to see, like, often we try to look for the inside straight draws for where these things might be useful. Right? When would it be useful? When is like the one time where you buck that simple rule of like, hey, amulet bad, scamulet, get rid of it. Maybe, what do you think? Like, imagine you're a person that you feel like you're unlikely to be voted out in the near term, but you are likely to be a bigger target near the end. And so where it's basically you accept, like in Austin, right?
Yeah.
Like the likable guy, charming dude, does not seem like be a target right now. People seem to like him well, but maybe down the line he would be. Then, hey, I can just ride this out. I got a fair amount of political power, but I'm going to need more individual power down the line. I think that's what it's designed for. But I think that what we all justifiably reacted to is like, man, these other folks, they really want that amulet, and it's not going to be good for them. I don't think it was great for them, to be clear. But maybe that for someone like Austin, I don't know much about Kelly's situation, to be clear. And now that Brando's gone,
no, not Kelly. Kelly was on the other side of what should have been two Rebas.
Yeah,
going in with like possibly some fractured numbers. I feel like it was the worst for Kelly. Like Kelly was in a great spot of social standing with shields, and I feel like should have, again, really counted it well this week, but put herself out there as a threat much more with the bounty.
Yeah, so if you're in a position where you expect to be very vulnerable and a likely target down the line, that would be the one, like in Austin, that maybe that would make some sense. That's the one. That's what I think about.
I disagree, because you're talking about a player who is okay now to hopefully get through that bounty to need an idol and have an idol later on. I think that changes the structure, because at that point that you have the bounty, you were going to be a threat later on, and now we've brought up that due date. So now the bounty has made you a threat earlier on. It's just not worth it. Like I feel like there is no nuance to this. Like, do not take the amulet. It is a curse. Like it is Devin Pinto style, not an advantage for me. I can't see another way in which it's, and like again, like if you're so desperate that you need it, you'll never get it. There is no way in which this makes sense for you. Yeah. Well, I mean, anyway, very anti-amulet.
I get it. I understand. All right, what else we got here? Any other cool questions?
Yeah. Liv says, do you think it was smart for Caleb to call out the 3 women on Reba during Tribal? Could it hurt his game? We haven't spoken so much about what Caleb did to kind of run it through, throwing things at the wall. First, he goes with Bruce's idol. Let's talk about that. He throws his lot in with Reba, being that I think they're more of a power group. And then ironically, in J Maya being the name, like he's using the idol to be like, and let's go for J Maya. Obviously, Bruce is not, a possible option, which makes it difficult for him, and Reba's the other name. Then he kind of has to put the heat on Reba to convince them to take out one of their own, but then they feel fairly put upon at that point. I did enjoy him pointing out the hypocrisy where they're like, you've thrown out my name. He's like, you're all voting for me, which is very fair. So all of that, idol, Tribal, liked or didn't like what he was throwing at the wall here.
So I think that it's unclear that anything he did in terms of Tribal changed the outcome to me. I mean, not to be results oriented, but like and I'm not sure how much it moved the needle. The question is, did it make his situation worse even now that he's survived? Right. So I mean, that would be one of the questions, because I mean, you mentioned he's just so effervescently charming, and that's my interpretation of the words, and that he can't help it. Even as he's strutting up to vote, he's being charming. The way he says Jay when she's voting, which you could argue is strategic, so it's clear he's voting for Jay when he's actually not, was charming. People chuckled, and Jay, even in that moment, couldn't like even respond wittily. It's just he has that disarming nature to him, right? And which is exactly the reason that he's being targeted in the first place, right? He's done everything. It reinforces the reasons why they're going after him. So now, again, so I would defer back to what I was talking about earlier, is that I think this is partly the narrative pushed by Survivor, that you never give up. And never giving up, this I think translates to a lot of people is do something.
One person in Lulu needs to not give up. I think that's what he has to carry that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it's like, and do a thing, take your shot, take a big swing, as Drew said at the end, right? And so that's what he did. He's like, I'm going to, and I think that if I am going to mind meld with Caleb, his calculus is one of, I'm in trouble, use my powers, and that power is charm. And it is very hard. It is very hard not to rely on the thing that has gotten you so far, and probably one of the reasons you're casting the show to begin with. It's sometimes the bravest thing is to not do a thing on the show, because not only from a position of like I'm feel like I'm depriving myself of agency. I'm not doing a thing when I should be doing a thing. There's also you could look like a fool on the show, because the show might edit you of like, oh, they just gave up, right? So it's like a double negative. It's a double disadvantage there that can crop. So I think that drives this decision making. And so I'm not sure it helped him. And I think he's going to be in an even worse situation. He's got to hope that the war starts soon, enough to save his life.
Well, we have a question here. It kind of ties into it. Is Madeline asks, how can Caleb come back from this? What's his best strategy to move forward? I'm going to defend Caleb a little bit. He was a dead man walking, like, yes, he didn't move the needle, but in terms of him throwing out so much there that he's now in trouble, 5-6 of the time, he's not there to be in trouble. He had to just like survive through this. And while none of it worked, like I liked him, especially throwing out Bruce's idol information, like that really tangible kind of evidence of trust. I think it's really unfortunate for him that it kind of then had to circle back to like, and that's why we work together to go for J Maya, which doesn't make as much sense with that information. If only there was a way. And again, a credit to both Kelly and Jake for both the connection they have with Caleb, that while he probably wants to throw anyone under the bus, he probably doesn't really want to throw either of them who he has a relationship with. And even if he did, they seem so, good from a social standing point of view that it wouldn't even help. So if it could have been Bruce has an idol and now we take out one of his allies, like a Jake or something, I think that would have been better, but there was nothing there, and I don't put blame on him for that. I just think that, I don't have a problem with what he did. It didn't work. I appreciated the effort. He's now not in a great spot. He's thrown Bruce under the bus. He, like he's earned Dee's ire. We even see on the next time on, she kind of seems pretty mad about it. I think it's a hard road, nay, an impossible road probably for Caleb to have this much heat this early. He was unanimously voted out. He's pissed people off. And the best case scenario is that a Bruce Katurah thing, or even just a Bruce thing, erupts early, or he gets in an okay position on this like double tribal coming out, and just survives a little bit with other fractures. But I don't think he's long for the game.
Yeah. So, and I think, yeah, I'm not going to get mad about someone when they're so clearly, and he correctly reads that he is the target and he's gone. I'm not mad about it. I'm just saying, like, what is there an outside the box play that could help you here? Or maybe I'm missing an angle here. Maybe there is an analogy to say, let's say Rick Devens. Okay. Like Rick Devens confronts, I believe, Julia. And I think the Jumping Ship Tribal Council, if I remember my Survivor history right, and gets Julia to say something that causes a big whisper tribal council. Like it provoked a response, and perhaps so one way that I can interpret what Caleb did was say, you know what, I'm going to use my superpowers, which is my my general charm, and be able to command of a conversation, and suddenly throw J Maya's world into a tailspin, and basically have a confrontation with J Maya, which I'm not sure is what he was trying to do, because I think he could have tried to actually confront J Maya and say, like, instead of just saying, this is what I'm going to have to say and I'm done, he could have like tried to get a back and forth and get her to say something that would maybe flip tribal on its head. I'm not sure what that would be, but I kind of just hope that you rattle her. That could be something he was thinking.
Yeah, I mean, he did seem to kind of rattle her.
Yeah, but she was rattled, to be clear.
Yeah. So a couple of Emily kind of related questions possibly. Matt Forrest asked, how does Emily not cast a rogue vote there in case Shot in the Dark hits? We have discussed it, but then I saw it kind of in the chat discuss a little more. So I'm not to read the chat, by the way, while we're doing this podcast. Great points. Appreciating most of you. Love you guys. No, I feel like I want to defend Emily here because it is risky. But what was kind of spoken about is if J Maya throws a vote, Emily's gone. So that's risky. But Emily is reading, but I think is a pretty clear lack of perception from J Maya. J Maya would never think she needs to do that. She does not think that she's next out if Caleb protects himself somehow. She's completely divorced from her reality, unfortunately, through a season that I genuinely think she would have got a lot of new information post-game. So if Emily's reading that correctly and can gain socially by not being, a wild card who's going to throw a vote, who's clearly in with Caleb, who, she knows has told to play the Shot in the Dark, like not aligning herself to that kind of othering of Caleb and Lulu, not being self-interested, I think is a good thing. And to be fair, it was a 1 in 6 chance that Caleb hits. For all of that and some risk in it, but a correct perception and read of where J Maya sits, I think it was right. Risky, but right.
I totally agree. I mean, I was part of a 12-1 vote one time, and the fear of being on the outs of that vote is palpable, because what are people going to talk about when they come back from that vote? Who voted for me? Who voted for me, right? And so, like, if in all likelihood, there's an 84% chance or whatever that she comes back to tribal council having voted for J Maya and been the only vote for J Maya.
Yeah.
What does that put her in? I'm assuming this assumes that I think Caleb must have told her that he's going to play the Shot in the Dark. I think I'm fine with that assumption. And yeah, and I think that, Adam Klein at one point compiled some statistics on how often people on the wrong side of the vote at the merge, how often they lose. So like you have to, being on the right side of the vote really sets a.
There's
like some data to support that.
Ever that they've won.
It's very rare. I mean, it sets the tone for the rest of the show. I mean, that stat was literally in my brain when I had to make that decision. I'm like, okay, no, I love you, Elizabeth, but I cannot throw a rogue vote in case something happens.
Owen has said the same thing, that knowing that stat when you voted incorrectly at the merge, he was like, oh no, statistically, I'm so unlikely to win now. So I'm going to have to be like an anomaly, or this is not going to happen. So yeah, and it's also not in just stats, although stats are important. It is in that really what you're gaining socially. When she's new to this group, when she's still trying to get in, when she's trying to turn around the perception everyone had of Emily, like it's weighing the odds of, okay, the shot in the dark will have to hit. And then J. Maya would also have to know that she's next in trouble and even have the foresight to throw a vote on me. Is all of that worth it in the unlikely event that happens to ruin some social capital? Weighing those odds, I don't think that it is. But yeah, I think we're in agreement there.
I think, I totally, I co-sign Emily's move.
Well, you mentioned being in a 12-1 vote. Last question here. I think we'll take the last question. Liv asks, will someone notice that someone other than Caleb didn't vote if 6 votes were enough to send Jay home? 2 votes for Austin to have to hide the sacrifice vote. Yep. Firstly, in terms of all the does not count. Now, Emily has been counting before, but how many does not counts is she counting? There's a lot of them. It's a big moment as well when the shot in the dark is just hit and it's live. And then it's going to go to the J. Maya, like 2 unanimous votes. One, like truly unanimous, like no one else had a vote. Yeah, can anyone read this, Christian? Like, can anyone counter that in this environment?
Well, I would say Emily has a decent shot of it. Normally, ordinarily, I would say, it's very hard to keep track of these votes at Tribal Council unless, Jeff is counting them. I mean, I literally would recommend future Survivor players count on their fingers. Okay. I like back when I would play in orchestras a lot, I would count the numbers of rests literally on my fingers to make sure I would not miss my entrance. But so I would recommend that. But Emily, though, is not only has she in the past clued into missed votes, so she's already aware. She's
in a smaller group, to be fair, much
in a smaller group, but she's also been made. But she's clearly aware of the importance of the vote count. So it wouldn't surprise me if she is now clued into it and makes a point of counting them. And I think, and that is, I mean, really, people, future survivors going out there should really count those votes. And because for Emily, imagine she did, like, imagine she's the only one. She can say, it's like, look, it's as long as she tells the right people, not the wrong people. It's like, hey, wasn't it suspicious that there was a missing vote there? It's dangerous because if you tell that to Austin or one of his close allies, it's like, oh, she's on to something that it's up to me. But if she knows too much, right? But like that's power. That is shot. That's never been more important than it is now to count the votes. And I think that's just a non-trivial chance she did.
Yeah, well, Emily, please don't come back after Tribal Council, sit around the campfire and say, why was there only 11 votes for Caleb?
Yeah.
Do we have those private conversations? We've used the information.
Yeah, the one-on-ones.
We've come a long way since then.
I hope that she has internalized the value of the one-on-ones for all the conversations for these kinds of things, because I think that's something that could help her game a lot. It got her in some hot water before, so I hope that she takes that away and runs with it.
Yeah, well, amazing. I think those are all the questions we're going to get to. We should probably start wrapping things up with, though, the Chizy, a difficult episode where I disagreed with a lot of people, even if they were in the chat. So the Chizy is what I do on my podcast, and we need to do it for the charts to get this math in. 3 points for the best player of the episode, in our opinion. 2 points for the second best, and 1 point for the third best. Mm-hmm. What are you thinking, Christian? Do you have your points here for the Chizy this week? How fun we're doing this with Christian, guys.
I do. I mean, I have to give my top ranks to Drew. I do.
Oh.
And I'll tell you my reasoning.
Mm-hmm.
I agree with everything that you're saying about, like, I think that it's a very good argument about keeping the numbers. And what I'm more looking at is like, maybe this one particular vote is less important than your overall standing and capabilities as a player in this moment, because Drew redirected the vote pretty effortlessly when there are a lot of people beating the drum for J. Maya. That's normally, I take that as a sign of capability in your current social standing in the game. I mean, I liken it a little bit to Omer. I mean, in terms of how he's able to redirect the vote. That's why I'm looking at that. Whether or not you agree with the actual choice of target, I think that is a great sign of his positioning. That I would give mine. Yeah, so I would give my number 2 to Emily, and the only reason I give it, I think that because the only reason she would be number 2 is just because I still think she has this propensity to say things in a big group that could get her into trouble, and that worries me a little bit for her if she keeps doing that. Hopefully, she doesn't. But the way she's positioned herself is really great. I think that it has a lot of reason to run deep into this game at this point. I don't think people see her as a threat at this stage. And I think that she's got a lot of, and I think that people want to work with her. There's something about how people want to work with her in spite of some of the things that she had said in the past. I mean, I know Bruce said he wants to stab her or there's some metaphor. There's one of the many things of saying Bruce was pretending to be nice, but actually is really out to get people. But I think I really like her for my number 2 spot. I think it's my number 3 spot is the trickiest. So that's where I kept going back and forth because I think everyone did something that I was like, oh, that was good. I kind of like that. And it's also something I was like, tactically, I might suggest something different. But yeah, I mean, again, going with my theme of people having some influence, I actually going to give a sort of a dark horse vote to Julie. All things. Yes, we don't see a lot of Julie. I don't know if that's a story thing. And my apologies for my picture a little off the wall. But she is a person, she's kind of, I get the sense that she's sort of in the shadows kind of player, sees an opportunity to cruise a vote along and says, yes, go in that direction. And I think there's a lot to take into account in terms of choice of target. I think that that's mostly where you come from, Shannon. Why these targets? Right? And because I don't have strong agreement with any of these choice of targets, what do I do? What do I look for? And I'm looking for the ability to cruise along a vote in a certain direction. I think that Caleb would be. I would say I would give Caleb some credit in this thing, but he's just in such a really tough position right now.
He did get unanimously voted out, so it's kind
of
tough.
It's hard to give him. But I'm looking. I guess I'm more grading on form than whether or not you stuck the landing. I guess is what I'm looking at this point. That's why I look for Survivor players these days. Yeah, but I'd love to hear your opinions.
Well, I don't think they're off the wall picks. I did a little differently. I think I have issues with Julie's read on J. Maya and her decision making. So Julie to me was off the wall, but I'm going to give 3 points to Emily, who I disagreed, with every decision that she made, compared to disagreeing with a lot of what everyone else did. The fact that she's not a target, I give so much credit to the people who, are in this such a claustrophobic environment, being vulnerable 6 against 7. We've seen how tight that can be. And for Emily to not be brought up and to not suffer and to know she's not going to suffer really, for Caleb hitting the shot in the dark, I think she did just as much as she needed to do. And I'm going to give her 3 points. I will give 2 points to Drew. I feel like his plans made the most sense, even if I would have had other options. Was trying to be congenial, going with J. Maya until he could get no heat for Caleb and is like, oh, that's better, and got it done. He was unanimously voted out. There is the issue, I think, with being between the rock and the hard place of telling Emily. So definitely, I'm critiquing the move, but I think it made the most sense for that kind of what should be a powerful Reba group. Also, I want to say it doesn't really count for the Chizy, but I'm kind of docking a point as well for saying he'd make love to the butter. Drew, come on. And then a point I'm going to give
the family show, Drew.
It just was a lot, Drew. What are we doing? I'm going to give a point to Kelly. I haven't given her points yet. I mean, she hasn't gone to tribal council, but she's clearly had a great social standing. And while I didn't agree at all with the amulet decision that I think should have put her in the firing line last week, the fact that she wasn't this week is, I think, a credit to that, accrued social capital, makes her a scary target, makes her too connected. I think she also treated Caleb well, and that decision about Bruce made him feel heard, is being adaptable in a way that I think does make sense, because I do see the issues in terms of what she could have with Bruce. So I want to give a little bit of credit there here in this episode of how she has accrued the social capital to this point to have it pay off here. And, also thinking of a Jake in that environment, who I think should be less of a target than Kelly due to the amulet, but still powerful kind of counter Bellow alliance isn't, really spoken about. There's a little bit of credit there. Katura as well, I think her instincts were better, but they're just honorable mentions. So Drew and Emily will share the Chizy win this week. And that means that the charts put Emily up to 20 in the lead, Drew up to 16, Caleb's on 8, Austin's on 7. Now Julie's on 7. Sabaya left with 5, Katura's on 2, Dee's on 2, J Maya left with 2, Kendra's on 2, and now Kelly is on 1. Those are the charts. We put them out every week. Do we have more, Christian? What, like an under 2-hour podcast for either of us? That feels like, how could we? Do you have more thoughts?
Well, I mean, I think that this is really great, Shannon. I'm glad we had this conversation, because
this was so fun, by the way.
It was great, and I think the thing that I'm really liking from you is that you have such a clear and reasoned opinion on the choice of move, and I think that and the choice of target, and based upon what you're reading and picking up cues as to what people are thinking. That is a tough skill to have. And I think that, and I think this kind of reflects in our slight differing of our Chizy points awarding. When I'm looking at a lot of these things, I think that what I am now looking for now when I see survivors is the process. And what are the things that I can judge that are clearly that I can judge pretty well with the context that I have as a viewer, which is limited. And so, and I think that that's interesting. And I think that that's one thing that's how I think I've changed. I think over the years of thinking about the show is like when I look at a conversation, often it's a conversation by conversation basis, right? Like you know, one conversation, who said what, when, and in what order, and to whom and why. And there you have all the context you mostly need. And so I think that as something that I've grown to appreciate more recently. Like the conversation with Jake and Dee about the target, right? And I think that's something I might encourage some of the listeners here to when you're rewatching these shows. Now look at 90 minutes of it. These conversations, there can be a lot of tension packed into them, and you just look, if you see the fear in Jake. And you see how he handles the situation. You know? So it's like, I'm not going to throw out a name because I'm not in a position to. You are Dee. And Dee is exuberant and wants to throw out a name. It's like, okay, all right, this is a situation I can tease something out that I think is pure and true. Who is doing something interesting? Who is doing something I slightly disagree with? So I don't know. That's been my perspective recently, Shannon. I don't know if that makes any sense, though.
No, I love it. I love all your perspectives, Christian. This is a gift to me. I don't want to leave. I know. I have a question myself.
Yeah.
Okay. I want to ask Christian Hubicki, Puzzle King, 2-part puzzle. What did you think? What did we like? The great equalizer times 2. You know.
So yeah. I mean, this one of the puzzle choices have been a little bit creative this season. They gave, the Savvy or Sweat was a Savvy and Sweat, where they gave a really ridiculously hard puzzle to Brando. I feel, and all those folks out there. So that's a really hard puzzle. But for this one, 2-part puzzle, do we need to be 2-part puzzle? I felt like that jigsaw puzzle at the beginning, perfectly fine. And then once you solve that, it's basically like a Denny's placemat puzzle.
It was Reba's. It was a Reba's puzzle. I love the Reba's. I love a good Reba's, right? Because you love Reba's because you're like forward, you know, like Reba's.
Yeah. So exactly, it was like, it reminds me of something like, I don't know if in restaurants, you ever go to like a family restaurant and there's little placemats and they have little puzzles on it, and like it feels like going to a Denny's. And I'm like, they're fine. I make those the idle clues, right? But like at the end of a puzzle like that, like a big long challenge, hey, you only need the one stage. You can do the jigsaw. I'd be fine with that.
I love a rebus. Marianne gives me a rebus every day. What happens is she and her partner, well, firstly, I'm ahead in time. So me and Peter, my husband, we do the Wordle. Then we send through our score. Then like a day and a half later, Marianne and Connor, they do the Wordle. They send me their score. And then Marianne sends me like an emoji rebus. So I have to guess the word that I've already done in Wordle 2 days ago. And honestly, she's not that good at it, or I'm not that good at it, because I can barely ever guess the word. And I know it from 2 days ago. So I love a good rebus. Jordan Kalish with the verbal rebus. Putting it together, I enjoyed it. In saying that, Drew wasn't on the word puzzle when he gave them the answer. What's the point of having 2 people on a puzzle when anyone can contribute? I thought that was a little silly, but I love a rebus. I was excited.
And I will say, I meant the creativity sort of line is sort of both a compliment and of course a criticism. Creativity in terms of like how hard they were. But I'm glad they are trying different classes of puzzles in the game, like the one that Brando, I think I associated with him because I always see the image on Twitter of him out with that puzzle, right? It is an entanglement puzzle, I'm trying to remember last time I saw an entanglement puzzle on Survivor. They're not easy. They're a different
We
class
did
of
it on
puzzle.
Australian Survivor. We did something
Australian Survivor.
similar.
See,
And
this is
that was
why
like
I'm
a team challenge, yeah.
see, yeah, yeah. So like
The
that's why
brain
I'm happy
teaser
here.
kind of,
You know,
yeah.
that's all. It's all in there. But like that, there are lots of different classes of puzzles that they can do. I mean, there are even different types of slide puzzles that they rarely do. There was a really cool one in season 38 that was tricky. So I'm glad that they're switching up the puzzle types, and not just because Carson might 3D print them. You know, I'm glad that they're because in principle that they are tests of your ability to reason on the fly, not memorize, right? As much as it's fun to crush a puzzle because you memorize it, and we all cheer and we cheer for people who have wonderful prowess. I'm glad they're switching up the type. So even if the Rebus, it reminds me of being at Denny's as a kid with a crayon, you know, I think that trying different types is great.
Yeah, people in the chat asking what rebus means. It's really hard not to look at the chat. They're like brain teasers, and I only know what it's like from Survivor. Firstly, the people asking, tell me you don't listen to Twitch without telling me you don't listen to Twitch. We do a Survivor rebus most weeks. Jordan does, which is very, very fun. And they did it earlier on in the new era. Remember, they would have those little puzzles. You know, Kristen, you saw that, right? And then one of them was Natalie, can I have your jacket? So it was like a gnat, and then whatever, I don't know, then a jacket, whatever. I don't know what the rebus was,
Well,
but
and they used to be hidden. They used to have them, I believe, for hidden immunity idol clues. It's sort of like where in season 21, when they changed up the idol hiding because they didn't want Russell Hantz finding all the idols without a clue, they made it hard to find. And I think they had these little like sort of word bind teaser puzzles, like where you with puns. They did
I love the
that's
puns.
not a rebus. Yeah. You know, like that's what that's what I believe what they do, if I remember correctly, from 15 years ago. So
yeah, I love a word-based puzzle. I was into it. But okay, should we get out some plugs? Almost 2 hours into what
I believe
you
so.
know, it's a late night for people on the East Coast. Okay, they're live right now. I think that's important. That's what they're doing a live podcast. That's why we're here. And the podcast is going to drop on Thursday. And can you imagine how much that live event went off, Christian? I'm happy to be here with you, but I have so much FOMO. Like if I was out of my seat when the shot in the dark hit, I can't imagine how that room went off. So that live podcast with Rob and many, many special guests is going to be out on Thursday. Moving it on. Yes. Okay. Big Brother also live. Maybe not as fun an episode. I won't spoil Big Brother, but it's going really well. We're really excited about how Big Brother is going in week 200 here. That's going to be live on Thursday. They're doing it actually live. So extremely exciting. Amazing Race. Rob, with his time turner, will be with Mike and Jessica Lee's playing, talking about Amazing Race immediately after this on YouTube. Stick around. Don't go anywhere. What am I, Julie now? Stay with us. Survivor UK. This one's mine. I'm covering Survivor UK. It started this week. And it's really fun. And we have a lot. We have X interviews. I'm co-hosting with George. Christian, one day when you get into International Survivor, you'll get to know George, who is just an absolute icon of the global franchise. We're doing recaps. I'm doing a patron check-in every week with Rob, and that one is unlocked this week as well. And then obviously the exit interview. So a lot of stuff happening in International Survivor now as well. And then we have The Bachelor in Paradise and The Golden Bachelor. I'm behind because there's too much on right now, but I'm obsessed with The Golden Bachelor. So check out all of our coverage on that. Bachelor in Paradise, more iffy on, but you know, check it out. Traders, Puya's leading Traders coverage around the world. Traders Canada happening right now. So there's a recap on episode 5. And don't miss that. So much good stuff. What a golden age of reality television we're in for kind of unfortunate reasons. And then become an RHAP patron community, live show tickets for the incredible events that are happening that I have so much FOMO from, access to international reality TV shows. That one's a big one. I get so many questions about this. This is me answering that question. Do it. Become a patron. Patron exclusive podcast, of which I am in, as I've said. This is a recap with Rob, doing the patron check-ins for the UK, and so much more. The 5 for 5, so much Big Brother content. It is crazy. So become a patron. And I think that's it. Christian. Oh, no. Follow us. Follow us. Social media, Robert the podcast, RHAP Grams. Follow. Is it C Hubicki? Is that what you are on social?
Sorry, I lost my headphones for a second there. So I'm assuming you said something incredibly witty.
No, I did not. No, I just asked. I just asked for your at. You're C Hubicki, right? That's your Twitter at.
Sorry.
Oh.
Yeah. So
I will check it myself. I'm
I
at Shannon Guss.
apologize. Let me
Follow
just change
me.
my audio here. But
Oh, good. Okay. Well, luckily we've spoken for 2 hours of this podcast, so we're kind of done. Here, I'm gonna find Christian myself.
all right,
I
I'm
should know
back. I
this.
apologize for
Okay.
that. Apparently,
It's
some
fine.
device in my home is connected to me like a robot and took over my headphones. So I
I
apologize.
know you say that we have I feel like you protest too much to be like, we've never had a strategy robot. But are you the strategy robot, Christian?
It's
Are you
perhaps the case.
secretly? Yeah, you're like, oh, I need to make up a fake job because I'm actually a robot. I make robots. It's a little bit too easy, I think.
Yeah, and I think that the one thing I was going to ask you is that I'm glad since we have you here and we have a lot of U.S. Survivor strategy people here. What is the take on Survivor UK? Like, if someone from the U.S. Survivor community watches it, what should they expect? Is it a lot like US? Is it a lot like other things? What is it like?
It's actually much more like Australian Survivor because UK television is more influenced by Australian Survivor. And I think there's some kind of crossover in terms of production from the more international franchises. At the moment, it's slow. The UK has not had Survivor for 20 years, over 20 years. So it's a lot different to the shot in the dark, hit for the first time, to, Murgatory, half of them are immune. That's not where we're at right now in the first 2 episodes. It's a little slower, but I've now, been so fortunate to watch and witness and then cover so many like reborn franchises. Now, Survivor South Africa was reborn very quickly. Like, it was this level of strategy immediately. New Zealand, we took our time a little bit. Australia, we took our time. And then we got to a place where the strategy in Australian Survivor is like incredible and like, evolving the global game in its own way. So all of these international franchises will go at their own pace and kind of influence the world in their own kind of specific ways. And I'm just grateful that I get to cover it. And I'm so grateful, Christian, that I got to cover this with you. An incredible episode. Everything was fire. Like, we used to say tribal councils were boring. Caleb throwing it out there, like,
Yes.
the shot in the dark hit. It was amazing. The whole episode
It was great. It's great. More blunt tribal councils. That, like, less obscure metaphor, more blunt. Great.
Yeah. So, I mean, it was sad because he knew he was going, and then he didn't go. Like, the second that happened, I was like, no, Caleb's gone. It was so exciting. It was such a great episode. The season is just in such a great place. I feel like for 2 of the episodes, I feel it's been fun throughout, but 2 of the episodes, episode 3 and this, I feel are like all-time new era episodes and episodes of Survivor generally. It makes me so excited about the show. And it just, not that I forget, but it reminds me why I love this so much, why I'm so lucky I get to do this, to cover it with you, Christian. Like, just a dream beyond a dream. Thank you so much for being here.
All right. Thank you so much for having me. It's great chatting with you.
It was really, really fun. I hope you guys all enjoyed it. Thank you to the chat. Thank you to all of the listeners. Thank you, everyone for listening. Thank you to Rob for asking us to do this. Hope you're having a really fun time in LA, hobnobbing while we are doing this. But thank you to the team behind the scenes. And Rob, we'll see you next time. Bye.